My name is Lusanda. I am a permit officer for alien invasive species for the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and the Environment. And I am here. Okay, so today I'm going to be telling you about the permitting process in terms of alien invasive species regulations. So the regulations, next slide. Okay, the regulations were published by the department on the 1st of August in 2014, and they became effective on the 1st of October the same year. They were later amended in 2020, and those amendments came into effect on the 1st of March 2021. And there's basically two main aims or the purpose of the regulation. And the first aim is to regulate invasive species and potentially invasive species that are already within the country. And the second aim is to prevent the illegal introduction of alien invasive species being imported into the country. Okay, so how do we go about achieving those two aims? The first aim, which is the regulation of invasive species within the country. The first thing that was done was to first identify those species, and then they were listed under the alien invasive species list. And then they were grouped into 4 categories: Category 1A, 1B, 2, and Category 3. If a person is in possession of a Category 1A species, they need to immediately take steps to combat or eradicate the listed species. If they are in possession of a 1B species, they need to control the species. And the definition of control based on the regulations means to eradicate or combat where possible. If it's not possible, they need to prevent as far as possible or as far as practical the reoccurrence, the re-establishment, the regrowth, the multiplication, the propagation, the regeneration, or the spreading of the invasive species. If you are in possession of a Category 2 species, you cannot conduct any restricted activity without a permit. And if you are in possession of a Category 3 species, you are exempted from having to require a permit if you are already in possession when the regulations came out, but you cannot conduct any other restricted activities. So what are those restricted activities? Restricted activities include the importing of listed species into the country, both via airplane or through shipping. It includes being in possession, growing or breeding the species, selling or conveying or spreading the species in any other way. Can also include the releasing of the species into the environment, the transfer of the species from, especially when it comes to freshwater species, from a water source where it is known to already occur to a water source where it's not known to already occur. And there's a number of other restricted activities that you can only be permitted for if that species is listed as a Category 2. For the rest of the categories, you are prohibited from conducting those restricted activities. You can find this on Notice 1 of the alien invasive list. So, why do we issue permits for Category 2 species? Basically, there are 3 things that we need to consider in order for the regulations to be sustainable. 1 is that they must have a benefit for the environment, 2 for the economy, and also for the social benefit of the overall well-being of society. So, with invasive species, we know that they do have a negative effect or a risk that is associated with them when it comes to the environment. However, some of these species have been used for years before the regulations came out to make money. People sell them. For example, your parakeets, Kate mentioned parakeets. Pet shops, they sell the parakeets, and people do enjoy having them as pets. Or your pine trees, for example. People have had plantations of pine trees for years before the regulations came into place, and they've been making money from them, and we do use them to make furniture and so on. So they do have an economic and a social value to them. Now, the aim was then to find a way for us to get to the middle, to the exit, where we can allow people to continue enjoying those benefits while also protecting the environment from the invasive species. And that is what the permits do. The permits come with conditions, and it is the person following those conditions that then allow the risk associated with that species to be reduced. I'll make an example with Nile tilapia. Nile tilapia has been found to be invasive because when it enters rivers with our indigenous tilapia species, which is Mozambicus, it can outcompete Mozambicus, and eventually in that river, Mozambicus ends up dying out. So, to prevent, but Nile tilapia still has an economic value. People still want to farm it and to sell it for food. So now, how do we get to a point where people can continue doing that while still saving the environment? The permit comes with the condition that you need to grow Nile tilapia in a rest system. If you're growing Nile tilapia in a rest system, the water will recirculate it within that system and will not go into our rivers, and therefore you can then farm Nile tilapia while preventing it from spreading into the environment. So that's how the permits can help out when it comes to reducing the risk while allowing people to continue enjoying the economic and social value of alien invasive species. Okay, so there are 118 listed Category 2 species, and it's mainly plant species, followed by mammals, reptiles, birds, marine invertebrates, freshwater fish, and freshwater invertebrates, and lastly, amphibians have the least number of listed invasive Category 2 species. Okay, so now that we know which species require permits and why, if you are now in possession of a Category 2 species, or if you wish to be in possession or conduct any other restricted activity, how do you go about obtaining the permit? Firstly, you need to obtain the application form and the risk assessment guideline. You can obtain this online, or you can email us at aispermits@dffe.gov.za. AIS and the P for permits has to be in capital letters, the rest is small letters. Once you've obtained the application form, you will fill it in, depending on which restricted activity you're applying for. And the risk assessment guideline, basically it's questions on the species that you want to apply for, where you're going to keep the species, why you want to keep it, and the measures that you're going to put in place in order to reduce the risk associated with that species. Once you've filled in everything, you then send the application back to us in the same email address, which is aispermits@dffe.gov.za. Some things that you have to note is that the application form the last page does have to be signed under oath, and you do also have to send in a certified ID copy that is not more than 3 months, and there is an application fee that you have to pay, but we'll speak about that a bit later on. Once you have received all your documents will be verified, and you will then be notified if everything is in order. You will be notified that you have received your application. Should there be something missing, you will be notified of that as well. The verification process also includes us visiting your facility to verify the things that you said you have in place as per your risk assessment. Once we have done all our verification, we will then send the application to the province that you are in, and they will do their own investigation. Once they are done with their own investigations, they will send back to us with their inputs, and they will consider all the inputs and all the things that we have collected and come to a decision. If the decision is to reject the permit, you will be informed in writing with the scientific reasons why the permit is being rejected. And if we are approving the permit, you will be informed that the permit has been approved, and you will then have to either collect or give us an address where the permit can be delivered. The permit application system is also used to achieve the second aim of the regulations, which is to prevent the illegal introduction of the alien and potential invasive species into the country. With this one, the same process that I just spoke about is exactly the same, with only two things that are different. Firstly, the risk assessment that you need to submit. Unlike the first one, where you just answer a few questions that you can answer yourself as the applicant, this one you do need to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, and you can find the steps of how to go about doing that on Chapter 6 of ILIMBA. But one of the important things, important differences between the two is that with this one you cannot conduct the risk assessment yourself. You need a risk assessment practitioner, sorry, and that person needs to be in compliance with the requirements of the National Scientific Professions Act. The second difference is that instead of sending it to the province, your application will be sent to the Alien Risk Analysis Review Panel, which will then be the ones that give the recommendation on whether or not they will give their recommendations, and once they will receive their recommendation, then a decision will be taken whether or not to issue the permit. We also do issue permits for research purposes. You use the same application form, and the process is pretty similar. The difference is that you can be issued, or you can apply rather, for any listed species. It's not just those in Category 2. So you can conduct research on a 1A, a 1B, or a 3 species. And instead of a risk assessment, you submit your proposal unless you are introducing a new species. If it's a listed species, you submit your research proposal. And instead, with the previous permits, for possession, breeding, and selling, permits are valid for 5 years. For conveying, permits are valid for 3 months. But if you're someone who conveys on a regular basis, we can give you up to 1 year. But when it comes to research, your permit will be valid for the duration of your study. Also, in most cases, research is done by organs of state, so there is no fee associated with applying for a permit. Okay, for the rest, if you are importing to the Republic, it's 200 per species. For all other restricted activities, possession, breeding, selling, it is 100 rand per species. For the renewal of permits, it is 50 rand per species, and it is important to note that renewals have to be done 60 days before the expiration date of your permit, and appeals are also 50 rand per species. For interest's sake, in the past financial year, we have issued a total of 385 permits. We've received applications, 385 applications, and we've issued permits, 389 permits. For Free State, it was 66 applications that were received and 60 permits that were issued. And I believe most of those were mammal species. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lusanda. We have an opportunity. As we can see, the permitting system is actually quite straightforward, and there's no reason why anybody that does needs to do any permitting just can't simply go through the motions. Do we have any questions with regards to permitting? Warren?
Just need the microphone's there. Just raise your hand up so the...
Gentleman over there, please. Thank you.
My name is Tyson Kochomela. I work for SAMI. I'm the regional coordinator for Emerging Species Program that is run by SAMI. And we're based in the garden and we work over the Free State. So thanks, Lusanda, for a good talk. I've got just a question here for you about the permitting. I see that at least you're saying in Free State we got 60 permits issued. And what does that mean? It means you have increased the number of alien species by 60. Isn't that right? So what I'm interested in is whether there's a specific terms and conditions that you put forward with those permits. Because one of the problems that we face with invasive species is that the people who have introduced them fail to manage them in captivity. And once you fail to manage them in captivity, they escape into the wild and become problematic. And the arguments that they put forward for really defending the need, economic, social benefits, and you said social, economic, and environmental, and all that. So, but the problem is continuing. So I'm keen to know about the sort of containment strategies that you import and you impart with the permits, and whether you do really rigorous monitoring to keep up with the use of the species to make sure that it doesn't escape, or else we are in for a problem and it's going to become bigger and bigger in the future. Thanks.
As I mentioned, one of the important things about the permit itself is the conditions that come with the permit. I said it is keeping the conditions that reduces the risk. So as long as people keep the conditions, we should be safe. But unfortunately, we do find that most people do not keep the conditions, but we do have a compliance team that does post-permit visits. And that's when we then monitor whether or not they are complying with the conditions. And if they are not complying, I'm sure, I think our compliance team will be presenting after me. So hopefully they'll give you a step-by-step on what is it that they do to try and ensure that people do comply with the conditions. But otherwise, if people are following the conditions, then the risk of escape out of the captivity or out of that facility that you have been permitted to keep the species in, it should be reduced.
Do we have another question? Here we go.
Thank you very much. This is Gxalo. I'm representing Klondike Properties this morning. I have a question. I'm not sure if the speaker will allow me to ask a question based on the previous speaker's presentation. Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay. I wanted to ask specifically with regards to the short hole borer. I wanted to know what is it exactly and how do you differentiate that between, let's say, a normal dead tree? In the property industry, we meet a lot of clients and we just need to explain to them, listen, be aware of these certain things, and I just wanted to know that. Thank you so much.
I'm going to allow Kate to answer this.
Well, I can say the short hole borer is quite a complex little organism. Since it came from Central Asia, and it's only been in the country since 2017. So a lot of work still needs to be done. What I can refer to you is on the Invasive Species South Africa Facebook page, the presentation that was done in Stellenbosch is very comprehensive with regards to giving you an indication on what it looks like, what is the symptoms that you need to look like. because if we have to go into those details now, we're going to be talking for a half an hour to 45 minutes. So that presentation that was done in Stellenbosch gives you just about the most up-to-date information that is available in South Africa on the shotthole borer. The problem that you do have, and I'd just like to mention, we do have indigenous species of the same beetle, but the visually you can quite distinctively see the difference, and they feed on trees which are still alive, where our indigenous beetles of the same species tend to feed on dead trees already. So that's one of the main things that you can use as an indicator. But please go and have a look at that presentation, and you will find that it is very, very thorough.
To answer your question though, in short, is look for dead branches, because when the shotthole borer enters the tree, once a branch is dead, it means that there are between 200,000 and 600,000 shotthole borer beetles in the branch. So dead branches are an absolute giveaway, and then also about 50 to 100, well, you can talk, there we go, and we're getting there. Debbie and I are a team. I'm going to talk about the holes, and then Debbie's going to talk about what's coming out of the holes. So look for between 50 and 100 holes. So you look for the holes, you look for the dead branches, and then the team goes on, you look for
the frass. Look for the brown frass seeping out of the hole.
Sometimes it's white.
Sometimes it's white. So make sure that you're looking for something coming out of the hole. So look for stuff coming out of the hole. So if you just see the holes in the branch, it's generally the indigenous Ambrosia beetle. But if you see frass, which is the poop coming out of the hole, white or black, then it's generally the shotthole borer.
This is the team, and why is it a problem? It's a problem because the shotthole borer burrows into the tree. It burrows all the wood and takes the wood out, but it doesn't eat on the tree. So from a horticultural point of view, the big problem these guys have is normally you put systemic fertilizers or granules on the ground, and it goes into the bloodstream of the tree. This particular beetle doesn't eat the wood, so it doesn't get poisoned. So it sits inside the tree, and then it creates its own farming. It farms its own little fungus, and it sits in the tree, and the tree actually dies of vascular problems. In other words, there's so many holes inside the tree that the actual bloodstream of the tree means that in actual fact its arm's falling off because there's no bloodstream. It's burrowed in there. So it's physically why the tree dies. The tree doesn't die because something's eating the tree. It's just if you've got millions of holes through your body, you start falling apart. That's why it is. So for the purposes of the property industry, that's what you look for.
Do we have any other questions with regards to permitting for Lusanda? Right, one over there.
Morning everyone, my name is Susi. Previously there was a discussion about the issue of the risk assessment. I'm not sure whether I'm following well, whereby people were not satisfied that if I were to import just a pet in a country, then I have to do a risk assessment. And I'm not sure where the government is that with that concern, because there was a reason that we found that the value of the species that are out imported to the country it's so low as compared to getting someone to do a risk assessment in behalf of it is just a pet. So I'm not sure if that issue is being addressed here.
I'm not sure if I understand you, but if you say a pair, I make an example of the pair. If that pair have never been imported to the country, you might be paying less for it, or you might feel like you're paying a lot for it when it comes to doing the risk assessment, but surely allow you to bring that pair to the country without you doing the risk assessment. We could actually end up using way more money after years of finding that pair is now becoming invasive. So that's why we need you to do a risk assessment. But that comprehensive risk assessment is only done if that is a new introduction, if we completely do not understand the kind of risk that will be associated with that. Otherwise, if you feel that it's a bit too much, then just don't bring it.
It's always an issue of weighing up the economic value over the short term versus the long term detrimental impact that a species can have on the country.